Hello and thank you, listeners. My name is Luke Mardigian, and you are listening to Be Insured, where we talk about business, leadership, and insurance. That way, on your worst day, when you need it the most, you will be insured. Have you ever felt stuck? Like you don't love where you're at? In fact, maybe even you hate where you're at right now, but you're not sure what your next move should be? And we got a guest on today, and I'm going to read from his book. When I was 30 years old, I worked in Flint, Michigan, and drove over an hour to and from work every day. I was married and did not have any kids at the time. I remember getting home from work late one February evening, and my wife was waiting for me in the kitchen. As soon as I saw her, however, I knew something was wrong. Her first words, "We need to talk." So his first thought is, she was leaving me. At least that's what he thought. A lot of things ran through his mind at the time, but he came to learn that his wife pushed him over a ledge and said, "Something is wrong." He doesn't remember exactly what she said after this, but this is what I heard. "You are not the same person that I married. I have noticed a change in you I do not like. When we got married, you were the happiest, most fun guy. You were enthusiastic and excited all the time. You are not happy now. And something needs to change. I don't know exactly what caused the change, but it doesn't matter. I don't feel comfortable about where we're going in our lives, and I need you to make a change. Something has to change. I've done some research, and I have a few ideas. You are a talented and gifted person, and I think you can do better with your life." Woo!
Got goosebumps. I got goosebumps.
It's weird to remember that.
So you know who wrote that? John Mashni.
Yep, John Mashni, who's on our show today. John, you wrote this book. Talk about it a little bit.
Well, I think maybe we got to start, that conversation was at a point in my life where I was working. I ran a media department. I'd been to film school. I'd finished undergraduate. I had a degree. I was going to go to dental school, or then before that, I was going to go to medical school, got a job at a startup, started working, and had gotten married during that time. And I thought this is where I was going. This was going to be my life. And then I came home from work one day, there was my wife waiting for me. And actually, it's not written in that, but my first thought was when I saw her and she said, "We need to talk," I immediately thought, well, this sucks.
Yeah.
Something's going down.
Yeah,
right?
Something's not good.
And I think ultimately that was probably the best conversation I've ever had in my life. It launched me in a totally different direction. And what I always think about, that was the moment 10 and a half years ago where I realized that life isn't about where you are specifically. It's about where you can go and where you believe you can go and where the people around you believe you can go. And it really opened my eyes to reinvention. I completely, professionally, personally reinvented myself. Really, that was the starting point, that conversation. It was really just a shock. It was something that I had to do because my wife said we have to change or else. And she didn't say or else what, but it was just basically like, we have to do something different. It wasn't just me either. It was both of us.
Well, unfortunately, a lot of people don't have the gift that Nicole gave you of that honest and clear communication. A lot of times it's just your spouse isn't happy or they're not thriving and you don't know why. And you think everything's great, right? Like you're bringing money home every day. We have food on the table. We have a roof over. Like I'm doing my job. What's the issue?
We look good on Facebook.
Yeah. Facebook
exactly
pictures are wonderful.
Exactly right.
And deep down inside, everybody knows that something's not quite right. But how do you change? I mean, how do you move on to something else? Typically in the book you talk about, typically there's a reason why you seek reinvention.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, first of all, can you define reinvention for us?
Yeah, let's talk through it because that moment led to a lot. And what I told myself starting at that moment was, I'm going to change. I am going to change, but I'm also going to take notes along the way. And I'm going to write down what works, what doesn't work. I really just made the promise to myself that I was going to take notes because I just felt deep down that other people were going through the exact same thing and they would go through it. And I was going to share whatever I learned with whoever would listen, as long as it actually worked. And about 5 years after that, I started to compile the notes and I said, I have to write. And what I figured out was this is the basics. There are 3 different ways that people reinvent themselves. And the first one is pretty much what my wife presented to me, which was a reactive type of reinvention, where something happens and you're forced to change. There's no going backwards. You just have to change it. It's real. And most people, you can think of an example. You get fired. You get laid off.
Your spouse leaves you.
Spouse, absolutely.
Death of a child,
health
or
scare.
spouse.
Yeah.
There's so many examples, right? We can't even list them all, but most people know exactly what I'm talking about. You just can't go backwards. The second type is what I call proactive, where you see a trend, you see an opportunity, you want to do something. No one's forcing you to do it, but you want to. That's what I call proactive. You're changing and you're not being forced to change. And for a long time, I thought there were only those two. But after a few years, I discovered a third one, and it's called reflective. Reflective is when you're trying to do something and you fail over and over and over. And instead of saying, oh, I'm going to go in a different direction, I'm going to try something else, you say, no, I'm not giving up until I do this thing that I have not been able to do. And instead of changing...
Sounds like insanity.
Well, you got it. And that's the point. Instead of changing the world around you, you have to really look inward and say, I'm changing myself. And that's reflective reinvention. And the point of defining each of those three things is that for each type, there's a different strategy that you have to follow in order to actually reinvent yourself for that type. And if you don't know the strategy, you're just going to fail over and over and over again. And that's what I felt over, the last 30 plus years of my life. And what I eventually realized was when I knew the strategy and I applied the right strategy for the type of reinvention, it worked. It was amazing.
Well, it didn't just work for you.
Yeah.
I can say that the main reason I'm having you on the show is because you helped me reinvent myself a handful of times over. First time leaving the police department and, helping me set a vision of what could be in the private sector and how to have influence in the private sector. And I remember specifically going to a Boy Scout fundraiser. Do you remember that? It was like on the Michigan State University campus. Yes. I've never had really any ties other than Cub Scouts to Boy Scouts, but John invited me along. And there I am knowing that I need to reinvent myself and do things that I wouldn't normally do. And bam, I run into one of our vice presidents from the company I was working for at the time. And suddenly my reality started changing, all because I followed what John was telling me to reinvent myself. I believe the exact person you told me to become was the Count of Monte Cristo. That's a great story of reinvention, right? This guy who, was betrayed and thrown into prison. And then when he got out, he became a completely different person. He had to reinvent himself to get what he wanted.
And that's what's so fascinating to me. It's so easy to live your life and think this is who I am and I'm never going to change. It's just so easy. You get in a routine, you get in a rut, you start waking up at the same time every day, you go to the same place. But what is so beautiful to me is that there are countless examples of people, they literally wake up and one day they are never the same. And sometimes it's a choice. Sometimes something happens that forces them to make different choices, but it's certainly absolutely possible to reinvent yourself at almost any stage and any age. It's incredible.
And it's cool to see how powerful the mind is and being able to do such a thing. Also, the capabilities of your realization of reinvention and wanting to share that with brothers and now everybody has directly affected me because Luke kind of in a roundabout way has helped me reinvent my life after getting out of the military and the death of my father. So to me, it's just remarkable, the journey of reinvention. And I'm so glad that we're talking about this. What type of person needs reinvention the most, do you think?
Living person, maybe.
I was going to say, how do you...
I think it certainly isn't for everybody, I would say that. But there are points in time where you think everything's fine, and then all of a sudden something happens. You get hit with something. Sometimes it's a health scare. Sometimes it's, like Luke said, spouse leaving you. Sometimes it's something even simpler than that. You fail at something, and you just start to get angry, and you wonder, how can I do better? For me, I have so many experiences of it. It's amazing. For me, it was a conversation with my wife. It was also an injury where I couldn't walk for an extended period of time. It can be almost anything, right? Yeah. Sometimes you see a trend and you think, gosh, if I don't take advantage of this opportunity, I'm going to regret it for the rest of my life. How do I do that?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think after reading your book and after several conversations with you, I think the person who would need reinvention the most is somebody who they just had some type of event occur or they know something has to change, or they're not happy where they are, right? I mean, those are kind of the two basic ones of like, man, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, but I do not like what I'm doing. I hate going into work. I'm grumpy when I get home from work. I'm not fulfilled. My family's not happy. I don't have the time for this, or I'm not doing this hobby that I like to do. Whatever the things are not happening that are making you not happy, then it's time to reinvent yourself. Mm-hmm. Your spouse leaves, reinvent yourself.
Even alcoholism or dependency issues could be the same type of thing.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we have all encountered men in our life that struggle with those things. So
one thing the whole this all really came about when I really started to think that other people could benefit was when a friend of mine called me and he said, "Hey, I lost my job." And just out of reflex, I said, "Congrats.
Yeah.
I'm super excited for you. I'm just so pumped." And I started celebrating like it was like a birthday or something.
And he was so confused.
He was really confused. He was like, "What are you talking about?" Well, and I just said, "Look, I actually know a bunch of people and they got laid off. And in the next year, like they found way better jobs. They make way more money now. They love their lives. Even they have more time. I mean, just so many advantages. So I'm actually super pumped for you. Like this is great news." And it's a little bit shocking to people. In fact, I thought of calling this initial book or some book at some point, "Congratulations, you lost your job." Because it's just, you got to shift the mindset a little bit. Like sometimes you think your life is over because something bad happened to you and hey, congrats. This is awesome.
Talk about or share some of the deep work you had to do inside yourself with this reinvention.
Sure.
That's what I kind of want to dig into, because this is the stuff that really matters, is the internal change.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, part of the problem with reinvention is there's a feeling that everyone else might be a little bit further ahead of you or a lot further ahead because they've been doing things longer.
Yeah.
You think, oh, if I just start right now, you know, at the time I was 30 years old, like I went to law school and I'm a practicing lawyer right now. And I thought, oh, well, all these people started law school much earlier than I did. They're going to be lawyers much longer than I am. How can I compete? Well, the reality is this. It's not just about time on the water to be successful in anything. Certainly that plays some role, but that's why it's important to understand the principles, the type of reinvention. And what I always think about is if somebody's in a bicycle and you're in a race, and let's say they're on a bicycle and they're pedaling as fast as they can, if you have a jet plane, it's not going to take very long to beat them. And that's the power of some of the principles that I eventually discovered and started sharing with people that are close to me. And now I'm writing and trying to share it with even more people. They might be ahead of you. Like, let's say they get a couple years head start, been biking for 2 years, made it across the country. It's like, well, guess what?
I got a jet.
As soon as I figure out how to fly this thing, it's going to work really well. And I don't care what vehicle you're in.
It's a great analogy.
Yeah. So what stops, this is great. It's a great concept, right? I mean, but what stops people from reinventing themselves? That you see so many people stuck in their jobs. Yeah.
There's, to me, it's not a matter of what's stopping people. It's that they just don't have the right info. And I specifically talk through things like the type of reinvention matters. For instance, when you're trying to actively reinvent yourself, there's some very specific strategies that you need to use. If you're trying to proactively reinvent yourself, there's other different strategies that you need to use. And if you're in one and you start to think, oh, I need to use these other strategies, it's not going to work. And you're going to be floundering. You're going to be there for a long time. You're going to fail and you're going to give up. You're going to lose hope. So I think, yeah, go ahead.
Do you feel like this is something that you're going to do throughout the rest of your life? Is constantly be reinventing John Mashni?
And not only do I think that that's true, I think that's the future of every single person that's listening to this. It doesn't even matter. Maybe you think I'm perfectly happy in my job. Things are going to change. There's going to be a recession. Something's going to happen. Laws are going to change. Business is going to change. People are going to change. You just cannot predict. And so absolutely, reinvention to me is the most powerful and important skill today. If you know how to reinvent yourself, you literally can do anything.
I agree.
So if I'm someone listening right now and I go, my job's not too bad, I don't think this reinvention stuff's for me. How would you respond?
Well, just specifically relating to jobs, I think the job satisfaction and job enjoyment is strictly related to the quality of someone's boss.
And maybe the conversation, how's your family feel about your job?
Right.
Yeah.
So I think
how do your coworkers feel
things
about you
can
being at your
change.
job?
Things can change all the time. And so either you're going to reinvent yourself or you're going to be forced to reinvent yourself. And you have to make that choice. It's one or the other, right?
I agree. So for people listening that feel stuck and hopeless, what advice would you give today? Read your book.
Read the book. Check out.
How do they get it? How do they get a copy of your book?
I think the first thing, go to johnmashni.com. You can download. I drafted a really short report on the 3 types of reinvention if you want to learn about each one. I give some great case studies, so you can check those out as well. And then you'll immediately go to a page where you can buy the book, $7. There's an audio version available too.
Excellent. Yep. So johnmashni.com. That's JOHNMASHNI. You can see that in the show notes. And man, I am so excited. Make sure you check in next week. We are going to be in part 2 of this segment where we dive deeper into the 3 necessary skills to reinvent yourself. You do not want to miss it. It's going to be life changing, especially if you're in a position where you just need to reinvent yourself. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time on Be Insured.